Hey, buddies, Potato Big Whiskey here, and today we're going to take a moment to talk about the Imperator development diary on the 29th of April 2019. Now, I know a lot of you guys who are keeping up with the game are likely to check this out on the forums, but sometimes if you're like me, I kind of forget. So I thought, what would be a great piece of content? That would be to maybe sit down once a week and go through the patch, because some of you might not have the time to go through it yourselves, and you might really not know enough about the game to really have a sense of how these changes might impact the game. And so I thought, I'd kind of just go through it and give my opinion on it and let you guys, maybe give you a sort of different perspective from your own to see how I interpret these changes. So, let's see. So let's talk about some of the different stuff. The first patch, Demetrius, is ready. As soon as the first patch is ready, it will be released this week, so that is pretty exciting for me. I'm actually curious, would you guys like to see me continue my game after the patch, or would you like me to start a new game? That is a question for the people who are watching my series. I'm kind of tempted to start a new game once the patch is out for sort of, get a new sort of foundational level on the mechanics. For Imperator, some things are different. We will aim to have 2 major updates per year with accompanying big expansions where we focus on flavor in the paid content while having core systems primarily a part of the free patch. That's really cool. Working on ideas for the first expansion, but before starting on that one, we're doing a big free patch which contains a lot of free features for all you. I'm really excited about that. That's really cool. It's sort of like getting, updates and fixes to the game, because the game does have a few little quirks and problems and stuff like that, so I'm excited to see what might come in that. This free patch has been in development since before the development version was frozen in mid-January. The design team are working on QA, coders working on stability, AI and polish for release. Our first big patch will be called Pompeii, and it will be out before the summer holidays, so that would be 2 months from now. I think that's 2 months from now. No, it would actually be potentially... I have to make sure seasons, because in Ireland we do seasons differently of the year. So I have to try and remember which one. From March 1st to June. So that would be... We would expect that from March, April, May, June. So probably sometime in May. So that's actually only about a month away from that patch, which is kind of exciting. So technology. While the technology research in the game was working mostly fine, we had some edge cases that did not work out all that great. First of all, it was impossible to really catch up when you were behind. That is something I definitely noticed and felt. And unless you're a really small country, so we did a reversed ahead of time penalty from when you're behind. That's really cool. I'm excited about that. That's a mechanic that exists in EU4 and in Victoria 2, and I believe in a sort of sense, it also exists in Crusader Kings 2 as well. Not so much in Hearts of Iron 4, although there are things that can help you catch up, like faction, research groups and all that sort of stuff. Very cool. I'm a big fan of a little bit of catch-up mechanics, because especially certain, if you were a small country, you could get some crazy tech efficiency, and if you're a big country, it was a much harder thing to pull off. And we did a reverse ahead of time penalty. Secondly, it was also possible to stack your research output so high that had rendering the ahead of time penalty useless. Yes, so you made the ahead of time penalty a multiplier on your tech speed. That is great. So if you're curious, Paint. If you're curious how it worked before, let's say you had plus 100% efficiency, right? Which is essentially multiplying your tech by 2%, and then you had a minus 20% research penalty. You would add these together and you would get plus 80%, all right? Whereas now how it's going to work is if you have a plus 100% or x 1.8, now how it's going to work is if you have a 20% penalty, it's going to be plus 60, because you're going to multiply the whole thing together, so you'll have 1.6. So that should kind of help take care of some of the weirdness that was going on with tech, and I'm okay with that. That means that is kind of going to consequentially make citizens a little bit less valuable for smaller countries. Still going to be very valuable, but I think it's just going to a nice little adjustment there. I think that's going to change the game for the better. The final change they made was the base time for a new technology from 15 to 20 years. That's actually a pretty big change, and that's going to take 33% longer for tech efficiency penalties to drain away. That seems like a pretty hefty nerf to getting ahead of time in technology, but I think that's going to be healthy overall for the game. They also added in some changes to the shattered retreat mechanic, and I definitely think that this was a very, very powerful. It had no drawbacks. I definitely agree with that. With the exception of, I think you have to spend like 10 military power. Now when you do a manual shattered retreat from the unit interface, it will also use 50% of its remaining strength. So now you have to do a little bit of calculus. So before it was like, oh, can I win this fight? No, I just shattered retreat because it's going to be a really bad fight. Whereas now you have to be like, okay, do I participate in the 5 days of combat before I can retreat? Or do I shattered retreat and lose half of my combat strength? And so that's really going to come down to whether or not you think you're going to get stack wiped. If you think you're going to get stack wipe, shattered retreat would definitely make sense, because if you're going to lose your entire army in 5 days, that's worse than losing half your army for clicking a button, right? So I think that's going to change the shattered retreat mechanic for the better. So truce breaking, as you may have seen in the dev clash, breaking a truce had no impact on your reputation, so now it'll increase your aggressive expansion as well, just like some other games do. This is, I think, kind of a minor change. I still think truce breaking can be quite powerful. The stability hit isn't such a big deal, but the aggressive expansion might be pretty painful if you're a rather large nation with a lot of pops who aren't your primary culture or your primary culture group, because they're really heavily negatively affected by aggressive expansion in terms of their output. They also have made some changes to mercenaries. Mercenaries were, while mostly performing like we intended, were too much of a renewable resource. Definitely felt like you could just endlessly send mercenaries at someone if you had like infinite money. That was dangerous. So they reduced the amount of mercenary companies and no longer stack them all in the most heavily populated areas. Okay, this is going to be I think an overall positive change. Maybe mercenaries will be just, this feels like a very mild adjustment. I think the real big impact here is technology and shattered retreat. Mercenaries cannot be stack wiped, and if they would have been, instead they now charge their disband fee from their employer and leave his employment. That's quite good. I think there was like an exploit where you could get the mercenary stack wiped and you didn't have to pay for them. Mercenaries that are no longer employed marching back to their home city will no longer reinforce during the march. Okay, that's a positive change. It means they kind of replenish slower. And you can no longer recruit mercenaries that have not recovered their strength. Okay, that's also a positive change, because mercenaries, like say if someone disbanded mercenaries in a war because they were running out of money, you could just instantly pick them back up, which was kind of BS. Regnal numbers, this is like a very small change. It's just like a little flavor change. So like if you have multiple rulers in a monarchy, for example, and you have 4 guys in a row that use the name Alexander, they will have the 4th, the sort of like little Roman numeral. So it'll be like John the 6th and so on and so forth. Assassinations were a little bit too powerful. So in these nations, the military skill of your master of the guard or bodyguard reduces the success chance of an assassination. This is an overall good change, I think. Assassinations were very, very powerful, especially because you could like assassinate people's generals, you could assassinate their rulers, you could basically just target anyone you could get your hands on and assassinate them to like make someone else's ability to fight war a lot worse. Governors, this is another really, really big change. One of the things that we completely missed when developing the game was the aspect of having governors' attributes matter. This obviously needed to change, so now the finesse skill of all governors will impact the output of cities they govern by 5% for each finesse. This is a huge change, in my opinion, because the finesse skill of your governor actually didn't really matter. It was often other skills that mattered. For example, I believe your zeal power for a governor mattered a lot when you were trying to do religious conversion, and I think it was your oratory skill mattered a lot when you were trying to do cultural assimilation, and I think the military score of the governor factored into the loyalty gain that he applied to the entire region. I can't remember the exact things off the top of my head, but this is overall a really good change. So now having really high score governors is going to be a really good thing. Population growth also had a few problems in that we only had one variable to play with. Yeah, I would agree with that. The only way you could interact with population growth was, increasing it with the population growth mechanic, like the growth rate. After a lot of discussion and testing, we split it up into population capacity, which terrain, technology, civilization level, and granaries impact, and population growth, which is impacted by resources and situations like your city being burnt to the ground by invading armies. That is really cool. So I'm not really sure how this is going to work. I'd have to really dig into the deep mechanics, but I'm really excited about that. Now, I believe these are the changes that will be coming before the end of June. or before the start of June, depending on how you measure the months. That's why we did that whole thing at the start. The old stability mechanics were partly legacy from the first Paradox games ever made, with a range from +1 to +3. That's one of the most complained uses of power behind the game, and that people do not enjoy being able to instantly increase their ability. First of all, stability is now 0 to 100 and decays towards 50. Of course, all events with changes to have been adapted in new range. Stabbing a pig costs 100 power and gives you 0.5 stability a month, and increased pig stabbing costs by 50% for 5 years. This is stackable, so the more pig stabbing you do, the faster it will increase in the time frame. Threshold for starting wars is a minimum of 10 stability, and you need 10 stability to appoint people to the government. Okay, I'm really interested to see how this changes the game. I think this is going to be better. I do feel like a lot of the mechanics in Imperator are kind of just... how do I describe this? It kind of feels like they just took... They built like the fundamental idea of the game and then brought in a bunch of mechanics from their other games to sort of form a baseline of kind of how things worked. And the stability mechanic, it feels very dated. You know, you press a button and the number increases, or something happens and the number decreases. This is going to make stability feel much more like a gradual thing that ticks up or down, and I'm very excited to see how that's going to impact how you play the game. War Exhaustion has also been overhauled. It's no longer an instant reduction for some power. You now spend a power to add an overtime reduction to it, and this can be stacked in a similar vein as pig stabbing. I like that too. It was kind of silly that you would have like +2 War Exhaustion, which was giving you +2 unrest across your entire nation, and then you would click a button and bada bing bada boom, the War Exhaustion disappears, and all of a sudden everyone is happy. And I do like this. This feels very thematic to me that you would change this, so I'm excited to see how that impacts the game. When changing stability and War Exhaustion, we also took a look at legitimacy and made it work the same way. Legitimacy is no longer increased with a button press, but a stackable short-term increase that you can pay to get. I do like this. Some of my concerns about this are that sometimes you will get yourself into a situation, like for example, provincial loyalty, where the provincial loyalty is increasing, but it's not increasing fast enough for you to avoid a civil war, even though all the population in the province is happy. So that's kind of an annoying thing that I'm hoping, well, maybe it's just kind of something we have to deal with. But I'm excited about that. Modding support, all those balance changes make them more easily handled. We changed the price structure we use for a lot of actions to support 4 new values instead of gold, powers, and manpower. So now you can use stability, tyranny, war exhaustion, and aggressive expansion. So you can assign ideas to increase your war exhaustion in your mod. Now you can do it. That is cool. This will give us monthly stability change, 0.5 for 5 years, I have to assume. So that is cool. That means, yeah, I'd have to know how fast it's draining and stuff like that. We'll go deep into how much more fun the naval game will be in 1.1. That is exciting. Cool. Why originally posted 11 June 2015? Interesting. But Johan, great development diary. I think this is going to be a lot of really positive changes for the game. I think the game, I think there's a lot of varying opinions about where the game is right now on release. And I think there are a lot of valid, really valid concerns. And, you know, I could go through them, you know, but like there's content out there if you want to see what people like, you know, talking about the problems with the game. But I also think the game is also in a really fun state. I think the game is really fun to play, and I'm excited to see how these changes are going to make the game more fun, make the game more thematic, make the game feel just a little bit better when you're playing. So I would say overall, I'm excited for the 1.1 patch, and I'm really looking forward to reading more developer diaries. Let me know if you guys like this kind of content. Do you like these kind of read-throughs of the dev diaries? Would you like to see something else instead? Would you prefer, you know, is there any sort of suggestions you would have for changing how I do this content? Would you like me to change, like, do you like just seeing me reading through it, or would you rather me do sort of a pre-written script and then have background footage of me playing the game? You know, sort of this is an exploratory piece of content that I'm kind of trying to gauge what you guys would like to see from these kind of videos in the future, because I would like to keep doing them. But yeah, that's it from me. I love you all very much, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.